information that it represents. Going to give you a number of examples as we go along here about this. And so, a symbol, we see it as a symbol, yeah, but that's the hologram. That's in the hologram. It's actually a vibrating information field, which enters the eyes. But it enters the eyes without fanfare. I can be looking at a symbol, I might not even know I'm looking at a symbol. I might be subconsciously looking at a symbol because it's just in my eye line and I'm not aware of it. But I'm taking in on a subconscious level that information field. But I don't know I am. Whereas, when you're getting communication to the ear, it's still a vibrating information field, what we call sound. But if it's within the audio range of the ear, you know you're receiving it, unless it's below threshold, subliminal. So the greatest way of getting information into the mind, into the brain, into the subconscious to influence perception is through the eyes, because you don't take it in. It's almost entirely subconscious. Look at that figure right at the start of the day, 11 million sensations a second, and the brain takes 40. But the subconscious takes the freaking lot, that's the point. And so, symbols, the information in symbols, is a gateway to the subconscious mind, which eventually filters through to the conscious mind and starts to influence actions. And when you focus on a symbol, you are, through entrainment, syncing your energetic field with what the symbol represents. Doesn't matter if you have a misguided idea of what you think it represents. What it actually represents dictates the frequency, and therefore, when you sync with it, there will be an energetic connection through the symbol to that which it represents, because the frequencies are the same. So when you're focused on that, that's taking you into a certain low vibrational frequency. I mean, like I said, a symbol of a religion. Energy flows where attention goes. So if you can get people involved in rituals or anything that involves symbols and you put their attention on it, you are connecting them energetically, frequency-wise, to what that represents. And, you know, sportsmen will say that when there's a big crowd and they're all on their side, willing them to win, they get energy from them. Why? Because the focus of the crowd on who they want to win makes an energetic connection with the person, and they start to feed more energy from the crowd. But it goes the other way too. When massive crowds focus on the symbols of this archontic force, whether it's personification or literal symbols, they're making the energetic connection, and their energy can be trawled because there is a frequency connection. And when you have these massive, massive rituals with unbelievable numbers of people, they're trawling energy. Go to a football match with a massively powerful atmosphere, and the hairs at the back of your neck stand up. Why? Because of the electromagnetic field generated by the crowd. That electromagnetic field en masse is what these people trawl. When you go to like Mecca and they're focusing on this, and we'll come to what that is shortly, what that represents is creating a frequency connection through what that represents to what that actually is. When they focus on Mecca, they're focusing on that Kaaba cube, and there are consequences energetically for that. When you have a satanic stage show and the crowd, the kids are focused on it, what it's doing is locking them into that frequency. Entrainment. So there's so many ways that we are fed off in that way. And symbols is a massive way. Of course, the eye is a universal symbol of this network. There you see the eye on the necklace of the mysteries. It goes way, way back. In banking and politics, in church, in state, you see it. This is thousands of years old, found in Ecuador. And there is the eye and the 13 levels of the pyramid. And under ultraviolet light, that even shines the illuminated eye. And that's what you find on the dollar bill. It's one of the major symbols of this Archontic network. And there's 13 levels, exactly as in Ecuador thousands of years ago. There it is in Freemasonry, because you'll find it in Satanism, you'll find it in Freemasonry, you'll find it in banking, you'll find it in politics, because they all ultimately are worshiping the same gods. That's MI5. There it is again, the security agencies. MI6, again, the pyramidal shape. This is a church. I think it's in Poland. And here we go, old Twerper's back. There you go, have a twerp. Stage show, there it is, classic. And these are locking people in. There's Madonna. What's the chances of this? Katy Perry, Angelina Jolie, Lady Gaga, CBS, Jay-Z. Unbelievable. What's the chances of Chancellor Merkel doing that every time? That's bloody ludicrous. It's not even a natural thing to do. And then you look, I mean, this is unbelievable, this. Animated bloody cartoons and stuff. This pyramid and all-seeing eyes frickin' everywhere. I'm not going to go through them all because of time, but every one of the shots that you're going to see has got that in it. Look at them, all over the bloody place. And this is feeding something into the subconscious of those who watch, overwhelmingly kids. The programming starts subconsciously from the earliest age. Like the Olympics in 2012, the one-eyed man, the eye. Here you had the Monsters, Inc. The central character had a single eye, and the monsters were feeding off the energy of children. It was their sustenance. And then you have this is unbelievable again, the number of personalities who get photographed covering one frickin' eye up in some form. I mean, look at it. And there's hundreds more. And most of them won't know. Another great symbol of this Archontic network in all its forms is the flame or the lighted torch. And what the Gnostics said was that the archons are made from luminous fire, the jinn were made from smokeless fire, according to the Islamic belief, and the archon phoenix, that all comes from this Archontic symbolism, the phoenix rising from the ashes in fire. And according to Freemasonic historians, the phoenix morphed in terms of symbolism into the more acceptable eagle, and that's why you have eagles on so many flags and state logos. So all this is putting information into the subconscious mind to filter through to the conscious mind. So, in plain sight, Saturn. Saturn is, I would say, after my research over the years, is fundamental to understanding how this, quote, bad copy became our fake reality and continues to be so. First of all, Saturn was widely worshipped in the ancient world. Question, why would it be when we can hardly frickin' see it, never mind what the ancients could do? Well, there's a story about why. This, as we see it today, wasn't always like it was, and in geologically very recent times, it wasn't like this. People like Immanuel Velikovsky and others have studied over the years and written books, and they've been followed up by people like the Electric Universe researchers like David Tolbert and Thornhill in books more recently, as they have looked at the evidence that there was a catastrophic upheaval in the solar system in the relatively recent past, not yesterday afternoon, but the relatively recent past, which could well sync with when this bad copy fake reality was locked in. All over the world you have global destruction myths and catastrophe myths manifesting under names like Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu, but they are unbelievable in their common themes of how they describe what happens. And after this movement of planets, which was a massive disruption of the electromagnetic order, as I mentioned earlier, which meant the stability had gone, they ended up where we see them today. Now, this is a fantastic book. I almost can't get it now, and if you can, it costs a fortune. But it represents a magnificent piece of research by this man, David Tolbert, one of the people involved in the electric universe information. It's called the Saturn myth. And what he did was study the worship of Saturn all over the world, studied its symbolism, studied what they said about it, studied why they said they worshiped Saturn. And what came out was this, that Saturn, once upon a time, was anywhere but where it is now, and at the time it had no rings. Come to that as we go along. Actually, it was the dominant planet, I would say star, sun, in the Earth sky. And the way they describe it, it went around in an orbit in sync with Mars and Venus as it moved around. And that was the dominant light, the dominant sun, if you like, from Earth in the Golden Age. And I say that Saturn is a dwarf star, which is not a great, amazing thing because there's so many dwarf stars out there, they say now, it's unbelievable. And what they said in the early astronomical traditions is that Saturn was the primeval sun. That's how they described it. And Plato referred to Saturn as Helios, the sun god. Not our sun that we see today, the Saturn sun, referred to as Helios. Now, we take Helios to mean our sun, because it's the sun god. I say that's a mistake. Actually, they were talking about Saturn. And Diodorus of Sicily, an ancient historian, reported that the Chaldeans in the same area, Sumer, Babylon, now Iraq, called Saturn by the name Helios and said that this was because Saturn was, quote, the most conspicuous of the planets, which fits exactly with Tolbert's research across and I tell you, it's across the global cultures. The creator of modern Christianity worshipped Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. Sol, it turns out, was another name that was used for Saturn and not the sun we think we see today. So when you start to let it kind of filter through, that at least most of the ancient sun gods were referring to the Saturn sun, not the sun we see today. That would make Heliopolis, famous city of the sun in ancient Egypt, as the city of Saturn, with the obelisks, the pillars outside the temple in Heliopolis. And that relates so closely to Solomon's temple, the mythical Solomon's temple. Every syllable of Solomon means the sun. Question now is which sun? And again, you've got the two pillars outside, just as with the one in Heliopolis. Then you come to Freemasonry, and its temples have the twin pillars worshipping the sun, the Saturn sun. Come to that as we go along. So when you go in this symbol, absolutely obsessed network, you come to the twin towers, the twin pillars. A coincidence? No chance. And what are the chances of this if that is the Saturn sun, Helios, Heliopolis? This obelisk in St. Peter's Square is an original obelisk put there from Heliopolis, I would say the city of the Saturn sun. And I've been saying for years and years and years and years that the Roman church is worshipping Saturn. The Bennu bird of Heliopolis was symbolized as Atum Ra. Both symbolized Saturn. And the Bennu bird became the phoenix, which became the eagle, as Freemasonic historians talk about. They worship Saturn as the old sun, the dark lord, and the lord of the rings. Later, Satanism is Saturnism. And it's also symbolized as an eye. Now, what Tolbert concluded from reading all these accounts of what happened to Saturn was this, that during these catastrophes, this is a quote from his book, the subject of the global creation legend, the global catastrophe legend, is a spectacular cosmic event actually witnessed by the ancients. Massive quantities of cosmic debris exploded from Saturn, clouding the heavens and eventually congealing into a vast band around the planet. Now, the band is described, like he said, as around the planet. However, what is described is the reflection onto that band of the sun we have today, made it seem from Earth as if there was only part of it, like a beard. And as the day moved on and the sun's angle moved, it's described as appearing that this band went around Saturn, as I'll explain. Now, this is one of Saturn's moons, and I only put this up here because it shows this light behind it. Now, the source of this light is not the same as I'm talking about, but it just gives a feel today, looking at that angle of that Saturn moon, of what it must have looked like in the way they described from Earth. This band, this luminous band. And what they said is, as the sun moved round its angle in relation to Saturn, it appeared from Earth that this was moving around around Saturn. But that became the main symbol because that appears to be what it looked like for most of the Earth day at that time. And so you see symbols relating to that all over the ancient world, which Talbot came up with. Let's just go further forward here. I'll come to something else. There's loads of them with the band and the disk Saturn. Loads of them like this, with symbolizes the horns with the planet, the sun in the middle of it. And Lord of the Rings was a name given to Saturn. And here you see in the movie, you see the same symbol and the eye of Sauron, the reptilian eye, as the source of power. They're using it now in Apple products as well. Here you have the man who started a satanic secret society in Germany called the Brotherhood of Saturn. And these are Saturn symbols, and there you see the round circle with the dot in the middle and the horns. Now, that round circle with the dot in the middle is said today still to have been an ancient symbol of the sun. Well, there's nothing when you look at our sun to use a symbol like that to symbolize it. But you look at that symbol in relation to what Talbot's saying, and it's very obvious what it was symbolizing. You had an unbelievably Saturn-esque stage show done at the Super Bowl in 2012 by Madonna with the luminous, fiery eye again. And there is Saturn with the crescent between the Twin Towers in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street in London. You look at the symbol of Islam, and it can be interpreted as the star and the crescent that was used in the ancient world. These laurel leaves symbols are very much in sympathy with that. This, of course, is the United Nations with the world as a target, very appropriate, and that is the symbol of the Windsors, the royal family, the Windsors royal family. That's, of course, an American great what do you call it? There's the flying disc, again, a Saturn symbol. You see that on many cars and in many areas of the corporate world. And of course, in that Saturn-esque presentation, you had exactly that used in the Madonna stage show. Now this is why Satanists worship the goat. In one form, the goat god Pan. This is Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages, who is one of the major Freemasonic historians over the years. He said Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. The god himself is a symbol of Saturn because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. And that is where that comes from, Baphomet, one of the most famous of satanic worshipping symbols. And you see them on this ring is Baphomet, on Beyonce, she's dressed, Lady Gaga, as Baphomet. And there is Baroness Philippine de Rothschild with Baphomet massively round her neck. I am staggered, I don't believe it. The owl is Saturn, the owl of Bohemian Grove. Apis or Apis, the Egyptian Saturn god, the bull god, the god of Saturn. And that's where you get the golden calf and all that stuff. And again, you've got the money system symbolized as the bull as well. Now, I said earlier that numbers are just digital expressions of frequency waveform information fields. This is called the magic square of Saturn, and it's also the magic square of Freemasonry, of course. And why it's magic is whatever way you go and you add those numbers up, they come to 15, don't matter which way you go. Now, in numerology, you add the numbers until you get a single number. So 15 in numerology is 666, 666, and that represents the energy frequency of Saturn, which I'll come to. Now, this is the sigil of Saturn, and they get it by drawing between the squares of the magic square from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. And that's how they get that. Now, if you turn that up on its side, you get that, which is what that is. The most obvious symbol of Freemasonry, because they're worshipping Saturn, which is an expression of this archontic fake reality. That is the symbol of Balmoral, the Scottish home of the royal family. Exactly the same, the sigil of Saturn. This is an ancient symbol of Saturn, the six-pointed star, the Star of David. It's not, they just hijacked that. It's a symbol of Saturn going way, way back. And this is where the name Rothschild came from. They had a red version of the six-pointed star on their house in Frankfurt, where the Rothschild dynasty came out of. And in German, red shield is Rothschild. The very name Rothschild comes from a symbol of Saturn. And they then took it and put it on their fiefdom of Israel. Saturn, same with many law enforcement symbols. There it is as an ancient depiction of Saturn, six-pointed star and the moons. There's the six-pointed star on this necklace of the mysteries. And here it is again. And all of these are from Asia. It is not a unique Jewish symbol. The Rothschilds took it as a symbol of Saturn and put it as a Jewish symbol. No one is more manipulated by the Rothschilds than the Jewish people of the world. No one. And here you have it in Christianity, the six-pointed star, an old ex-pope. And there it is between the pillars in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry in Great Queen Street in London. It's all Saturn. They're all pissing in the same pot, all of them. Now, another ancient symbol of Saturn is the black cube, which you see all over the place. And this is interesting. We're going to get in now into how this matrix actually works. This is a permanent hexagon storm in the North Pole of Saturn. It's 2 Earths wide. And it's going all the time, and it rotates exactly in sync with Saturn's radio emissions. And in geometry, the hexagon is also the six-pointed star and is also the cube. They are different expressions of the same energetic state. And so when you look at this is just a crop circle, but that's coincidental. You look at that crop circle and it's a hexagon, a flat hexagon. Look at it again, but see it three-dimensionally, even though it's exactly the same picture, and it becomes a cube. They are different expressions of the same energetic state. So a hexagon is also a cube, is also a six-pointed star in geometry. And therefore, this cube, the Kaaba at Mecca, is a symbol of Saturn, and that's what they're worshipping, though they don't realize it, though the inner circle will. The black cube that Jewish people put on their third eye as part of their ritual is Saturn. And when they worship at Mecca, they even make them sit in concentric bloody circles. They'll have them going round next. And so when they are doing their circling of that symbol of Saturn, that which is that frequency can feed off it. This is the symbol of Saturn in terms of astrology, and this is the symbol of the Soviet Union, which was created by the Rothschilds. The symbol of Saturn, the hammer and the sickle. Sickle become relevant shortly. In fact, now, this is the ancient Greek god of Saturn called Kronos, the bearded man, holding the scythe. And Kronos is Father Time with the scythe and the beard. Chronos, chronology, time. It's where it comes from. It's going somewhere. Saturn is the god of space and time, so it is said. Crown comes from Kronos, the god of Saturn in ancient Greece. The Grim Reaper is Saturn with the scythe, the death cult, exactly. Then you've got El and the Elohim. El is the Jewish god or the Hebrew god of Saturn. I would say El and the Elohim in the biblical realm is Demiurge and the archons. And you have archangels, Michael, Gabriel. The El goes all over the place. We have elections where the pawns are elected to serve the elite. We have Israel. And that is the symbol of El, the black cube. It's Saturn. The black sun, the dark lord, the demiurge, Saturn, Kronos, Satan. They're all different ways of saying the same thing. Then you have the bearded man. The god is always kind of symbolized with a beard. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from Kronos, the bearded man who is the god of Saturn. You see beards in religions all over the flipping place. And the beard comes from this symbolism of Saturn with the luminous crescent. And so we come to probably the most famous bearded man, the Saturn pattern. Well, hello from Rome. This guy comes from Rome and the worship of Saturn. This is Fritz Springmeier, a very accomplished researcher into all this. Saturn is an important key to understanding the long heritage this conspiracy has back to antiquity. The city of Rome was originally known as Saturnia, or the city of Saturn. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of the Saturn worship, hence Heliopolis obelisk, in its ritual. Saturn also relates to Lucifer. In various occult dictionaries, Saturn is associated with evil. And Saturnalia, the 5th century Roman writer Theodosius said that Saturnalia, which was in Rome running up to our Christmas, was to mark the time when Saturn suddenly disappeared, which fits with that catastrophe story that Talbot talks about. So Saturnalia, that is the ruins of the temple of Saturn in Rome today, is actually Christmas. They decorated trees, they gave presents to each other, they used holly, same thing. And Santa is an anagram of Satan, Saturnalia, it's Kronos, the Saturn god. Now the bearded man is often used for Saturn. This is William Blake, who was a very deep thinker and knew a lot of inside information. And he painted this picture in 1794 called Ancient of Days. Ancient of Days is one of the phrases used in the Bible to describe God. And he depicts him as the architect. This is on the GE building in Rockefeller Plaza in New York. Again, the Ancient of Days, which I say is the demiurge Saturn, the architect. Freemasons call their God the great architect of the universe. The demiurge was called by the Gnostics the great architect of the universe. And in the Matrix, we had the architect creating the fake reality, the bearded man. And when you look at Saturn, the control system, it fits all the boxes of the society we live in. The religions, secret societies, and Satanism are worshipping Saturn. Astrologically, in other words, energetically, Banking is astrologically ruled by Saturn. Politics and the institutions of state of all levels astrologically ruled by Saturn. Corporations astrologically ruled by Saturn. Law in the court system astrologically ruled by Saturn. Science astrologically ruled by Saturn. And it's amazing that the left side of the brain and the traits of it, and the Saturnian traits and the reptilian brain traits are remarkably the same. So all these different parts of the human institutions of society are Saturn's little helpers. The vast majority not knowing, the inner circle absolutely knowing. All this court symbolism and religious symbolism and the headgear in education, it's all Saturn. And you see it endlessly in corporate logos. Now, Jordan Maxwell has been talking about Saturn symbolism being all over society for decades and decades and decades and decades. My question is, why? Why is Saturn symbolism everywhere? Why is it worshipped by all these people? There has to be a reason. Well, I think this is the reason after what I put together. The Saturn moon matrix. The Gnostics said of the archons, they make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce virtual reality experience. And they say of the jinn in Islamic belief, manipulate humans by creating illusions. I went into this subway station in New York a few years ago and saw this painted on the floor, and I thought, that's extraordinary. You had the eye and the ring, Saturn, and over the world was this broadcast system, basically. But it started a train of perception and research. And again, we go back, do we live in a simulation? What is the archon illusion that's given us this fake reality compared with the one that was before? What is making us decode a different reality now to the one we did before? And it seems to me that Saturn is fundamentally part of this fake matrix that we call the world, and that part of what it does is act as a firewall from the original reality so we don't decode it, just like they do in China to stop people getting great tracts of the internet. Interestingly, the Gnostics say the outermost planetary sphere or archon of the matrix, I say, was Saturn. Beyond that was Leviathan, a snake swallowing its own tail called the Ouroboros. Souls had to pass through this to reach paradise. There was another esoteric concept called the ring pass not. And this is a point where while you remain in the illusion of duality, you can't progress beyond it, called the Ouroboros, the snake swallowing its tail. And there on that Saturn symbol, you see the Ouroboros in the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry, exactly what the Gnostics described. And within that reality is what we call time, the great controlling mechanism, Chronos, and Saturn, the god of time and space. Now, coming from Saturn is a particular frequency, and it's the frequency that's making that storm at the North Pole. And this is Saturn, which is recorded by NASA. Nice, man. And what the Saturn rings are they're made of sound. I had this sent to me by a sound engineer. This is a ring of Saturn from a particular angle. And he said, I see that every day. That is sound. And there's a thing called cymatics, which is creating patterns purely by sound, where they put kind of particles on a metal plate, and then they play sound across, and the sound, which is an information source, makes the patterns move into a certain sequence. And as the sound changes, the pattern, the sequence, the symbol changes. And it seems the higher the frequency, the more complex the patterns. So sound is a vehicle for delivering information that creates form. And this is a cymatic symbol. the six-pointed star, created purely by a particular sound. And that's what that is, and that's why it rotates exactly with the radio frequencies of Saturn. This is a standing sound wave, and it's an eye storm at the south pole of Saturn, which is permanently going round, and will do so while the sound coming from Saturn is that sound and that frequency. There's a standing wave, looks like an eye, done in a studio. This is the standing wave of rings done in a studio, just like Saturn. It's all sound. Now, these symbols here, I got off the internet, and what it is, they're playing through really fast. You can't see what the symbols are, but when you freeze frame them, what they are, they're reacting to sound. And when you freeze frame them, suddenly you see the symbols that are appearing very fast, but you can't see with the naked eye. There's a six-pointed star in one of them. There's a hexagon. And so a symbol is an expression of a sound, and a sound is an expression of a symbol. So all these symbols and this magic square numerologically of the magic square of Saturn are all representations of the frequency of Saturn, and when they interact with our subconscious, they're locking us into the frequency of Saturn from all over the place. A sound wave creates a symbol, and a symbol generates a sound wave, although we won't be able to hear it in our range. So when you see these artistic patterns in churches and stuff, we see them as patterns, but they're actually a representation of sound frequency. So on an inaudible level, they're giving it off. And Saturn is, therefore, I suggest, a major part of the broadcasting of this fake reality, which we are decoding into a world we think is real, but is actually fake. And maybe that was the pineal gland once. And maybe now that's Saturn, which has hijacked the pineal gland. So Saturn was ringless, according to the ancients, before this great catastrophe. So where did the bloody rings come from? This man, Norman Berggren, has a long, long history, he's in his 90s now, of working in high-tech space and missiles and NASA and all the rest of it. And he wrote a book some years ago called The Ringmakers of Saturn, because when he studied pictures of the rings, he realized they were changing, and not only changing, they were being made as you looked at the pictures. This Voyager spacecraft went closest to Saturn in 1980, and then there's the Cassini craft, which arrived in 2004, and I think he's still in the area. And when he compared pictures from both of them, and then compared pictures in relation to the other, he realized that the story of Saturn was very different to the one he thought and he'd been told. He said this in his book: several years ago, a number of folks in the astronomy and physics world began to theorizing that these rings had to be much younger than the universe, perhaps only about 100 million years old. But one pair of pictures shows a change in 5 minutes. An impression is conveyed that the latest reported measurements purport to be the true ones, when in reality all might be quite nearly correct at the time of observation, but general reluctance to accept variable ring system geometry occurs because of the apparent failure to identify a physical mechanism suitable for producing recurrent change. In other words, because they can't explain why it's changing, they'll just deny it's bloody changing. And on the pictures, and NASA has these pictures, he saw these, what he calls electromagnetic vehicles. And these are thousands of miles long, some of them. And if anyone thinks that's fantastic, that's the Earth in relation to Saturn. We're not talking about the same relationship to size. And there's loads of them on these pictures. These electromagnetic vehicles, he calls them, all over the place. Here's one pictured next to the rings by the Hubble telescope. Here's a few NASA pictures showing one of them apparently moving. You put the pictures together. Why have we never heard of these except through Norman Berggren? And then he found pictures where these electromagnetic vehicles went into the rings, and all this stuff was coming out of them that were making the rings as he was looking through the pictures. They're not natural. They say the water ice and stuff is in the rings. I reckon you'll probably find that there's a certain crystal in the rings that is generating the frequency. And this is from just a couple of weeks ago. The mysteries of Saturn's expanding F-ring. Saturn's most distant ring is twice as bright and 3 times as wide as it was during the Voyager flybys in 1980 and 81. The great mystery of Saturn's rings, how they formed, why are they like that, we don't know. Well, maybe we do. There's this massive ring that was found in 2009, about 3.7 million miles out from Saturn, but around Saturn. Get 1 billion Earths in it. And I'm suggesting that actually that broadcast comes across to us. The Saturn matrix is a band of frequency which we are tuned to, and we think it's real. It's a virtual reality as described by the Gnostics. Now, I'm going to move on quickly because we want to run out of time, but the moon, as I've said before, is fundamentally involved in this. I read this book, Who Built the Moon? The evidence for the fact the moon is not a natural body is fantastic. And interestingly, what the book found was the relationship in terms of mathematics and all the rest of it of the Earth, the moon, and the sun is completely different to anything else in the solar system. And what the Gnostics said was the archons created the rest of the solar system but did not create this. The maths involved in the Earth, Moon, Sun system is nothing less than staggering. They've been put together with the accuracy of the proverbial Swiss watchmaker, the book said. That's why the moon is about the same size as the sun, almost exactly at the time of an eclipse. And the moon is perfectly placed, said this BBC documentary, to sustain life, but that's pure luck, a cosmic coincidence. I don't think it is. We never see the other side of the moon. We only see one side of it. And they say in the book, the moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, and much lighter than in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight. They've got no idea. They first of all had the whack theory, something like a Mars-type planet whacked into the Earth and bits became the moon. That didn't work out. They had the double whack theory where it came back and had another go, and so they go on. And these scientists saying here, the best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon doesn't exist because it shouldn't if it's natural. It seems easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence. And they've smacked the moon a number of times with massive explosions and impacts. And what's come from that is the evidence says the moon is actually hollow. This is NASA scientist, again, Gordon MacDonald. It would seem that the moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere. This man from MIT said the lunar orbiter experiments had vastly improved knowledge of the moon's gravitational field and indicated a frightening possibility that the moon might be hollow. The moon is inside out, said this scientist. And as Carl Sagan said, a natural satellite cannot be a hollow object. These scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, I talked about this at length in my books, wrote a major article in 1970 suggesting very strongly, with considerable evidence, that the moon was actually a construct. And people like Ken Johnson, who've worked for NASA on photographs from the moon, he's come out and said actually there are non-natural phenomena all over the moon, including bases, things you can't explain that are not natural. And there are towers which have been smudged out, some of them not very badly. What the heck is that on the moon? Here's a close-up of it. I mean, what's that? That's not natural. So where did it come from? Who put it there? This is called blue gem, or the blue circle, which it kind of shines electric blue. Was seen as a light from the 1700s by astronomers. Now we can see what it is. 29 miles in diameter. What the bloody hell is it? No one can say. And in so many ways, the moon appears to be something akin to the Death Star moon in the Star Wars films. And indeed, 2 moons of Saturn look remarkably like the Death Star moon. And it, as I put it together over the years, is like an amplifier of the Saturn broadcasts, which are then fired at the Earth in with far greater power and thus influence on our reality. And if you put that there, it kind of gives an indication of what I'm saying. Now, talked about that Charney project, what came out from it. Long after I've been talking like this about the moon and its influence on our reality, this article came out, and in part of what was said in it, it talked about the moon. They said this entity that they connected through a computer system with said the moon is not a natural heavenly body. Life was better for humans before the moon came. Moon forces control time and manipulate the mood of humans. The moon is there to control the Earth's mood, emotion, and a big calm would come over the Earth without the moon. There would be only little storms, not big storms. The old race, Archons, captured the moon from space and located it next to the Earth. That is said to have happened by many, many ancient cultures. People and animals without the moon would become calm and peaceful, and anxiety and fear would dramatically decline. The oceans would be much calmer, heavy thunderstorms and lightning would be rare, and the climate would be balanced with no extreme heat or cold. Telepathic interdimensional communication would become widespread, and people would be able to see new colors, higher frequencies in an enhanced color spectrum. And that fits with the fact that this frequency, this matrix, is suppressing human expansion of awareness, keeping us in the box. There would be major changes. This really left field, this one. There would be major changes to the human respiratory system as blood and breathing chemistry changed. Those born after the moon's demise would be able to hold their breath underwater for hours at a time. The Saturn-Moon matrix. That's the reality we think is the world, the one that is locking us in to this round and round and round free society. Go to work, work, buy, consume, die. Work, buy, consume, die. That's the matrix that's playing us. Control the energy sea and you control human perception. We are in a band of frequency. A band of frequency is the matrix, a band of frequency of information. We are blinded by the light. We look at light and we think light is like luminous, but that's just the decoded expression of an energetic frequency field that we call light. And when they talk about God saying, "Let there be light" in the Old Testament, I would suggest that's far more likely this demiurge, fake God in this Genesis description, building the matrix. Let there be light. The speed of light in the walls of the matrix. Beyond that is beyond its walls of suppression. So people are within the matrix thinking it's the world going round and round and round, being played like a violin while they think they're playing the instrument. And like a prisoner in a pitch black cell, we may never be able to see the walls of our prison. And that is the wall, I would suggest. And that's why anyone gets close to saying we can go faster than the speed of light, the scientific establishment comes down on them like a pile of bricks. Real? Is it real? Is the night sky real, or is it a planetarium? I've been thinking that since I was a kid. Well, for a start, it only exists in that form in our heads, so quite easily it can be just a construct rather than what we call natural. The archontic architects of our fake reality. And so this scene from the Matrix movie is absolutely perfect if you had two words. The Saturn-Moon matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. Human world, no, it's the Archon world, and they're trying to make it more and more the Archon world, which is why the world is changing in its image. And I came across these books of Carlos Castaneda long after I was into all this stuff, and I fell off my bloody chair nearly when I read some of it. They're based on the words of a Central American shaman called Don Juan Matus. And this is what he said. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our Lord and Master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we do not do so. Indeed, we are its prisoner. They took over us because we are food to them, yes, low vibrational emotional energy. And they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in coops, the predators rear us in human coops, human eros. Therefore, their food is always available to them, especially if there's lots of wars. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man, the engineer, and the stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, yes, our ideas of good and evil, yes. Our social mores, they are the ones who have set up our dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predator who makes us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators have engaged themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. They gave us their mind because they gave us their frequency, and we are decoding their frequency and thus becoming part of their hive mind. The hive mind, the Archons, the reptilians, and the Borg in Star Trek, classic representation of the Archons. All of these different groups are said to operate with a hive mind, a hive mentality. And we've been connected to it. The Borgs, they were like transhumanist type figures, exactly really in the cyborg way that the Archons are described. And the Borg used to fly around in black, dark cubes. Why do humans blindly follow rules? Because they blindly follow the matrix. Don Matter said, I know that even now, even though you have never suffered hunger, you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator who fears that any moment now its maneuver is going to be uncovered and food is going to be denied. Though through the mind, which is after all their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them, and they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. Sorcerers of ancient Mexico reasoned that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, avatar society, feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays. And then everything seems to disappear and we have now a sedated man. What I'm saying is that we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he's destined to be, is no longer magical. He is an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man than the dreams of an animal who is being raised to be a piece of meat, trite, conventional, imbecilic. And what they've done, because of our superior creative potential and expansion of consciousness potential, they have, although they are inferior to that in terms of potential because they are a distortion, they have reduced our, or that of the vast majority of humanity, to a lower level of awareness than they have. And thus this fits the situation perfectly. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man